Okay, it's just gone 10 o'clock, so I think I might as well get started. We got out the back? Yeah? Okay, cool. So, my name's Kurt Foster. I'm going to talk about the Single Digital Presence project today. I'm currently the tech lead for Single Digital Presence, and I'm just going to kind of give a general overview of some of the technology that we're using. Okay, so what is Sdp? I think most people would have heard a little bit about it yesterday during Jethma Benaragama's talk. That was very kind of high level, mainly just around the need for DPC at a business level. But basically what we're trying to, or a problem that we're trying to solve is right now a lot of Victorian government websites are incredibly hard to use. Most of them are in government speak, so you'll see a lot of websites that are almost policy documents that have just been copied and pasted onto the web. They're very departmentally focused, and one of the other issues we have, so similar to GovCMS, is we have a very large number of content management systems and very wide ranges of quality for those systems. And so one of the things we're trying to do is change all that around and have more of a UX-led process. So everything we do is really trying to start with the citizen and the citizen's needs. And so that includes both the design and the user interface, but we're also focusing a lot on the actual content. So we're doing iterative design and development. So at the moment we have generally 2 week cycles of external user testing. So we're constantly actually going back to citizens to find out, is what we're doing actually working, and what other things do we need to do. We're trying to whittle down the number of websites as well. I think we have over 1,000 websites at the moment. But because of that incredibly large number of websites, it can be almost impossible for people to actually find the information that they're really looking for. We're going down to a single CMS, which I'll go through a little bit later. So it's a simple content admin experience and also a single hosting platform. And hopefully a very consistent developer experience as well. So the benefits that we're hoping to realise out of this really is that focus on good UX, which is for citizens, but also for VPS or Victorian Public Service staff. But yeah, also hopefully for the developer community as well, as we improve the tools that we have, for actually building sites on Sdp. We're going to have a really big focus on the administrative interface. So we've got some UX sprints starting very soon to actually have a look at everything that's going on with Drupal admin. I actually met someone from Lullabot who's a part of the kind of Drupal UX initiative, and we're going to be working quite closely with them as well. We're focusing a lot on improved security. Security on a lot of government websites as well is quite variable. And some of the other things we're hoping to get out of this is some better government collaboration as well through that consolidation of some of our content. So we've chosen open source. Obviously I'm preaching to the converted in this audience, but obviously that collaboration with the community allows us to get a lot more for the development hours that we actually put in. And we're really focusing on trying to give a lot back as well. So everything that we've built so far is actually currently open source and all available on our GitHub. And yeah, what this means for us, I think, is hopefully some big savings in terms of money for government, but hopefully also ending up with a lot better product. And one of the main goals, I think, for us is seeing how much we can actually give back to show that Victorian government is actually trying to lead the way and kind of join in with the community and really give back. So we've already started with some intergovernment collaboration down in Victoria. So we've got our alpha.vic.gov.au website, but recently Victoria Police, the shared service provider website from Department of Treasury and Finance, and several others have actually come on board, and they're actually contributing overall to our product. So we've decided to go with an API first approach on this. One of the other projects that Victorian Government is working on now is a whole of Victorian Government API gateway. And so we're really trying to focus a lot on APIs and how we can deliver content to citizens in an easy way for them. So it's quite important, I think, these days to not focus solely on a website being the only way that we actually do our communication. By making sure that we've got really good quality information and it is available via an API, it means that commercial entities out there can actually aggregate our information together, or any of the data that we have on data.gov or data.vic.gov or any other commercial sources to come up with new apps or websites that are presenting all of that information in ways that are more useful to citizens. So for our purposes, we actually had a lot of use, or a lot of need for content reuse, and this is one of the reasons why we've gone for this API system as well. We're actually powering a large number of websites off a single content management system. So we've essentially got like a multi-site system working inside Drupal, which allows us to share certain content across a number of websites, but still allowing them to appear, with their current design. So privacy policies and disclaimers, I think, are really easy examples of that. But that central content management system also allows us to focus on what we're calling joined up user journeys. So someone who's looking for information about buying a house might actually need to start out on vic.gov.au, but then some of that information might exist in Department of Housing. And rather than having completely separate websites that have no real link between them, content editors can actually quite simply relate those pieces of content together in the back end and create a fairly seamless journey for that user. And hopefully they don't really notice too much about the different websites or departments that they're looking at, but that content's presented in a way that's very easy for them. We've gone for headless, so that means we are using a front-end framework. We've chosen Vue.js, so a few of you might have caught the talk with Guy and Tim yesterday, which kind of went through what we're doing there in a bit more detail. But some of the reasons for that is it does actually reduce some of the hosting costs for us, and it can really improve performance as well, because we do really have a whole bunch of these very lightweight front ends presenting the data from our content management system. And we've gone for a containerized hosting solution. I think most of the people here are probably aware of Lagoon now, so anyone who's working with GovCMS would know that they've just moved on to the Lagoon platform. That's something we've been running with now for about 12 months. And I think, the benefits are really quite obvious. The auto-scaling and auto-healing that you can achieve when you're actually using containers is absolutely fantastic. And there's been a big focus on security for us as well. So it was really good to see, I think GovCMS have got their IRAP certification sorted out now, and that's something we'll be resolving for ourselves next year as well. Essentially, we're all running the same open source stack, so it's kind of just a tick of that box now to finalise the certification. With all of this, it has actually been really hard. We've started off with a very small team, and I think we've taken on quite a lot. When we started, Lagoon was really quite early in what it had available for a non-developer client, and moving to headless actually meant that there was a lot of stuff that we actually need to build, so a lot of improvements around what we needed out of JSON API, and kind of building everything in our front-end framework not from scratch, but there was a lot of work in there. And there's a lot more to do, so I'm going to do another shameless plug, just like Jith did yesterday. For anyone who is interested, we actually have a spot open for the Sdp tech lead role. I've actually moved into a different role in DPC, and currently I'm doing both roles, so yeah, kind of looking for someone new to come in and take the reins, and really kind of lead that direction about where we take the product next. Okay, so how do the sites work? So one of the main things we're doing is trying to absorb quite a large number of websites into vic.gov.au. So the original project was actually looking at 50 separate DPC-owned websites, and we're looking to consolidate a very large number of those into what we're calling site sections. So Aboriginal Victoria.vic.gov.au, for example, would just be vic.gov.au/Aboriginal Victoria. And that's just reducing the very large number of websites out there and consolidating that content into something a little bit more easily digestible. One of the other parts of that is actually trying to refocus that content as well. So content for veterans is actually aimed at people who are veterans rather than the Veterans Affairs Department, which is kind of the old way that we were structuring websites in the past. Outside of that, we have what we're calling our semi-independent sites. So a semi-independent site is a website that is still using the same Drupal CMS, but it has its own front end and its own URL. So we might be powering, say, maybe 10 separate websites off the one Drupal backend. Outside of that, we have what we're calling our fully independent websites, and that's when a website does need to be completely separate. A lot of the time that's actually for legal reasons, so the Premier's website, Parliament, the Victorian Government Ombudsman, those are organisations that sit slightly separate to the Victorian Government, and for that reason they actually need to have all of their content completely separated as well. And in that instance they actually take a copy of the Drupal distribution and the front-end framework to create their own completely separate, fully independent site. When we started this journey, we did actually have 2 proof-of-concept websites as well, which is the governor.vic.gov.au website and also dtf.vic.gov.au. And we took those 2 sites to try and prove some of the things that we were actually trying to do. And they still sit kind of slightly outside of this system here, but we'll kind of eventually roll them back into the main SDP distribution. Okay, so how do the different layers work? So Bay is what we've called our hosting platform, and so this is basically using the open source Lagoon platform on an AWS that we manage with support of Salsa and Amazing. And Bay essentially holds all of our websites, so that includes all of our fully independent websites as well as the semi-independent websites and site sections. And we also have a few kind of external websites that don't actually sit with the rest of these layers. So yesterday Jithma was talking about My Victoria, which is a GIS product that actually sits on this platform, but right now it's not actually using the rest of the SDP layers, it's just the hosting. Tide is what we've called the Drupal 8 CMS. And in this layer, we've kind of got a big focus on automated tests. We're really trying to get as much test coverage as we can. Obvious reasons for that is, to kind of run with as lean a team as we possibly can, while also, maintaining our quality. And we can obviously have one or many different instances of the Drupal CMS on that layer. And our final layer is called Ripple, and that's our front end, or that's our pattern library, and that's what we actually build all of our different websites on. And so that's our Vue.js pattern library there. And so that includes vic.gov.au as well as all of the other semi-independent and fully independent websites. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about the hosting platform. One of the things that I saw when I arrived, so I've only been in government for 12 months now, is a whole bunch of examples of what government, or what Victorian government has been doing in the past. So there's a lot of examples of this. So it's just a single web server and everything's sitting on there. And if that falls over, basically there's not a lot of room for recovery and a lot of people just panic and we try and get it back up again. And this is kind of the idea that people have probably heard of the precious pet versus cattle idea. So a precious pet being something where we can't actually lose this server because we rely on it completely. And it's not a great example of how to do hosting. I found a couple of examples where we actually have like an orchestration toolkit. So that would be something like Ansible or CloudFormation, Terraform. Some configuration code that actually allows us to bring that server back up again, so that if the worst happens, we do have some ability to actually bring the site back up live again. But probably a lot fewer examples than I'd like to see. There are a few examples of this, which is actually a pretty solid setup. So just a standard load balancer with a number of different servers, so that one of those servers can actually go down and we can keep our sites up and running. I found a lot more of this than I ever would have thought of, particularly knowing the amount of money that had been spent on some of these sites. Just Captain Dodgy's like my hosting co. And there's been a few of those, and I've been moving away from those very quickly. And then there were a couple of these which really scared me. So I kind of jumped in. I was like, right, this looks all pretty decent. And then I took a look and it's like, oh, hang on. Okay, the load balancer is only pointing at 2 of these servers and the code on them is actually completely different. But they kind of look the same when someone actually visits the site. And then I've taken another look and it's like, oh, actually, no, the DNS is not even pointing to the load balancer at all. It's just pointing at one of the servers. All right, so then things start to get really quite interesting. And then I took another look and it's like, okay, well, the orchestration toolbox doesn't actually have anything to do with what's going on. Nginx is kind of sitting there for some reason, but just for CSS and JS files and pointing those off to server 3, which has a completely separate copy of whatever else is going on. And then I look a little bit further. I found this in one instance. There was the CSS and JS files were actually pointing to a completely separate, unrelated website. And that's when I did this. I have actually moved those sites, by the way. They're not still sitting like that, just by the way. Okay. We've got a number of people on PAS, which is obviously really good. It's nice and easy, set and forget. And then we've got one example that I know of at the moment, which is Department of Justice, which has moved to this kind of cattle type setup. So there's an orchestration toolbox that allows every single server in the stack to automatically scale. You can delete any server in the stack and the whole thing just kind of comes back up. And that's kind of, I think, the minimum standard that I think we should be aiming for in government. But what we've gone for is containerized. And so the big difference there is instead of having all of our different services on a single server, every single thing that we need, every application we need, so database, web, caching, is contained in its own small container. And then those containers can scale up within the actual virtual machines that we have. That allows our scaling to be incredibly fast, but it's also highly available. And so, yeah, this has been going to be a big benefit, I think, to what we're doing in the future. The other big benefit of this is for local development. Everyone's actually running essentially the same containers that we've got in production. So those issues where you actually have bugs that exist in production but no one can replicate locally should really be reduced. Okay, so yeah, some of the benefits of this is obviously, yeah, developers working on a clone of production to really reduce those environment-based issues. But also our scalability becomes a lot easier to control. So when we're setting up our auto-scaling rules, we can basically say we just need Nginx to scale up when there's high load, but that doesn't mean we need to, scale up an entire VM with all of those resources on it. And so overall, that means that we scale a lot quicker, but it also keeps our costs down. Okay, so the content management system. We've got a Drupal 8 distribution. Our distribution is actually pretty lightweight. It's kind of like with Lightning, when they moved to Lightning 3, they started splitting all of the individual functions out to modules rather than being contained in the distribution itself. And within each of those modules, we're also trying to focus on automated tests. So we're using Circle CI to run all of our tests. Every single module, whenever we do a PR, it actually spins up a vanilla instance of Drupal, runs through all of those tests, and so that we know when we're actually running our main tests in an individual site or with the profile itself, all of those modules are actually doing exactly what they're meant to be doing. Big shout out to Alex Skripnik if he's here, and Tsuchi Garg, who is over there, who helped us set up a lot of this stuff. Our content structure within the CMS is pretty standard. Like there's nothing really amazing that you're going to see there. News, events, grants. We're using taxonomy for tagging. One of the things that we have tried to get happening is what we're calling a landing page, which is a very flexible page that allows users to add in a whole bunch of small components of content. Each one of those components in the back end, or the paragraphs in the back end, relate to one of the front end components, and it allows content editors to have a very flexible experience, so they can create almost any page that they want, while also maintaining a lot of control and ensuring that they're not breaking any of the UX or the design that we've actually put in place. Okay. So some of the features we have here. Oh, actually, I've just remembered. I was hoping to do questions through something called Slido. I forgot to announce that right at the beginning, but if you look up in the top right-hand corner, there's a URL up there, which will take you to that service, and 5141 is the ID. You can just type questions directly into there. As they come into your head, people can actually upvote those questions. I'll take a look at those at the end and basically just go through the highest voted questions. Okay, so going through the features, obviously we're API first. We've borrowed a lot, obviously, from the Contenter module, and we've contributed a number of things back. I'm just looking, Enzo isn't in the room at the moment, but Enzo Garcia is helping us out a lot on the JSON API side of things, where we've had a number of issues with some of the ways that JSON API works. Tsuchi's laughing at me now, and Enzo's got actually some of his friends are on the maintainers of JSON API, so we've been able to get a few fixes through quite quickly, which has been great. Path aliases and dynamic routing has been something that I'm pretty happy with how we're working with that in Drupal and all the way through to the front end. One of the issues with having multiple sites in the back end is that we actually need to manage a single path alias that can then go across a number of different sites. And so that can start getting quite tricky when path aliasing in Drupal is only for a single path. And so I think that some of the stuff that we've done there is actually quite good, and I'm really happy with that. So if anyone's interested, you can always jump onto our GitHub repos and have a bit of a poke around, or ask me questions. I'm usually actually on the GovCMS Slack, if anyone wants to shout out on there. One of the other big things we're trying to tackle, and Tim and Guy on my team went through this in their talk, is around Webforms. Drupal Webforms are incredibly powerful, and that is something that we're kind of tackling piece by piece. So we've got about 11 different field types that are all working now, as well as front-end validations and stuff like that. But yeah, there's still quite a lot more work to do in terms of how that's working. And one of the things that we're really going to start focusing on quite soon is around media management. So I think most people have to admit media management in Drupal could be a lot better. And so we're kind of taking that back to our UX team as well to try and take a look at, what things can we do to make that easier for content editors. Okay. So the big benefits there is basically that consistent editing interface for editors right across, our department initially, but any other departments that join up. And so that also makes life easier as people move from one branch or one department to another. They're already trained on exactly how to use the website. Sharing content and making those joined up user journeys across a number of websites becomes incredibly easy. And yeah, the other one really is that big focus on starting every single process with UX. Okay, and the final layer is Ripple, and so this is our front end. So we start on atomic design principles. So this is a term coined by a guy named Brad Frost. All of our atomic design actually starts with our UX team. Those atomic designs then work their way into the actual designs, and it's only at that point that we take those and start turning those items into components within our front end. And so the way this works is basically, an atom is the smallest element that you're going to have on your page. So that might be some title text, or it might be a text input within a form, or a button. And once you compile all of those different atoms together, you turn those into a molecule, which might actually be just your search form. And so within our component library, each one of those atoms actually has its own package, and they're all treated separately, and then we compile those together to create our organisms. And those then become templates, which are kind of larger areas like your entire header section on your website. Okay, so our pattern library is it's called Ripple, and that's our implementation of the atomic design that we've been given, and that's actually available now at ripple.sdp.vic.gov.au. And that's actually just an implementation of Storybook. I'm just going to go over to that now. And so what Storybook basically allows us to do, it's really hard to see that screen from over there. It basically displays all of the different atoms that we have, as well as the molecules, pages and templates. And so it not only shows you exactly what one of those items looks like, but gives you a little bit of example source code of how you would actually implement that particular item in your own website. And you can also get a copy of that on our GitHub. So that's our organisation is just DPC-SDP, and so yeah, that's called Ripple, but you can get our Tide repository there or any of our other repos there as well. So our front end stack is Vue.js, I think as I mentioned earlier. Nuxt was actually a talk given by Tim and Guy about Let's Go Nuxt. And Nuxt essentially provides the glue between our Tide CMS and our Ripple pattern library. And yeah, we're currently using some tools called Puppeteer and Jest for actually running all of our automated tests on the front end. One of the things that Guy and Tim went into yesterday is we're trying to run most of our tests on something called Cucumber. And so a number of people would be familiar with Behat. And what Cucumber allows you to do is it's almost a plain language way of writing tests. And so we're trying to use exactly that same kind of plain language test writing across our entire stack. And that's going to allow our BAs and QA people to actually increase the test coverage that we have without taking too much extra time from our dev team. Okay, so some of the benefits we get from Ripple. Obviously, the big one for us is our sites are running faster. We're going to be able to get a lot more kind of dynamic page actions happening. So one of the things we'll move to later is just refreshing search results as an example within the page rather than requiring new page refresh for certain things. It means we'll be able to quite heavily cache a lot of our pages, but actually refresh content from the client side. So that increases that page load speed, but also means that people are always going to get the latest content. And each of the components can actually be used independently. So every single item that we're building is actually available as a separate package on our npm.js account. So it means that a lot more people can use it than just on the Sdp platform. Okay, so in summary, so where are we at right now? Our scope was initially just for a number of internal DPC websites, there are about 50 websites, but we've already gone kind of outside of that. I think I mentioned, Victoria Police, Department of Treasury and Finance, as well as a few others have already come on board. And so we're continuing to kind of build on top of what we have. The work on the hosting platform is essentially complete, although we are kind of adding new features all the time, so improving the admin interface and the developer experience for reviewing logs, taking backups, and a few other things like that. The Drupal distribution is actually really solid now, and I'm really happy with where that's at. And the same with what's happening on the front end. And at the moment, it's really just a big focus on feature development. And so we're getting kind of adding new features all the time. And one of the things that we'd really like to do is start kind of building and joining other government and Drupal communities. One, to give back, and also to see what other people can help us with. Okay. And just going through those benefits again, obviously it's a much more consistent user experience. Big focus on improvements in the admin interface. A lot of improvements just around security and the scalability and performance of our hosting. Hopefully to make a lot of cost savings across government. But the main thing, is hopefully really delivering good results for citizens and allowing citizens to actually get the information that they need when they need it. Okay. We're really interested in feedback. So we've got alpha.vic.gov.au, which is essentially a vanilla installation of everything that we've built so far. And there's little feedback forms down the bottom there. So if anyone wants to take a look and give us feedback, that'd be great. And also we've got our GitHub organisation. So if anyone wants to have a play around with any of the tools that we have, you can just start submitting issues directly within GitHub. Okay, and that was me, technical lead / operations manager. And okay, I'll go on to the questions. It's really hard to see from down here. I don't know what I'm doing. Actually, I'm just going to bring that over here. I can't actually see from up there. Josh, do you know, is it possible to turn the sound down or off? I'll turn it down on the Mac, but it doesn't actually make any difference because the HDMI.
I think the controls over there.
Okay.
It's not.
That's all right.
You can just read it.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question I have here is how do you share content between sites in a single instance of the distribution? I'll actually just show you how that works on the site. So we're basically running that via a taxonomy term at the moment. And if I scroll down, we've got this sites taxonomy. And so a piece of content can belong to one or many different sites. And so that determines like basically the all of the different sites it can appear on. But we've also got a primary site. And the reason for that is we're using meta tags to actually state what the canonical URL of a particular page is, just for SEO purposes. That site then actually ends up as a part of the path alias that we use. And so each site has an ID. So if it's site 4, the instance of the contact us page for site 4 will be, site-4/contact us. And we use that in the API to actually figure out exactly which piece of content we're looking for when we make a request. That was from Dan. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. What about the content screen? How do users filter? Like if I just want to see content for a site, can they do that?
They will be able to, I think, in mid-Feb. Yep. It's not really a massive problem for us right now. Because it's actually the same content editor group who are working on all of the same content right now. But yeah, around about that time, it's going to become a bigger problem, and that's kind of when we've booked in to build the interface for it.
And permissions as well, I guess you're trying to...
Yep. Yeah, so that's all planned for around about the same time.
Quickly, how's the routing handled?
Sorry?
How's the routing handled?
How's the routing handled? Okay, that's kind of right in the weeds on that one. I'm trying to think. Essentially, we have a specific API endpoint where we send in a request to say, well, for this particular site ID, give me some of the basic information. And so that initial request gives you stuff like the name of the menus and some of the other global elements. So let me just go across to the website. So it grabs a number of global elements, so like the name of the website, menu, some of the items are on the footer. We then get a UUID from that point that we can use to send further requests, and we'll say, okay, this is my site UUID, and I need the contact us page. And then we've got some custom JSON API enhancers that go through and say, okay, well, based on that bit of information, I'm going to return what would normally be like a /node ID request from JSON API. So it allows the front end to actually just send in the named route. Yeah.
So that's on the assumption that you're using Path Auto.
Yeah, we are using Path Auto, but we have our own kind of enhancer. Yeah. Yeah, and we need that basically to manage those, what end up being multiple routes back to the same piece of content. Yeah. And so the main alias that we have in Path Auto is for the primary site. And then that enhancer is really required just so that we can manage exactly that same piece of, or that same alias for all of the other sites as well. Yeah. Second question here, why did you pick Vue.js for the front end, and how do you tackle server-side rendering /SEO and browser support? Why Vue.js? I can see someone laughing up there. Nigel, is that you? Oh, okay. Why Vue.js is like a really big question. Like we actually went through that for a really, really long time, kind of going backwards and forwards between React and Vue. Yeah, I think that's probably a better conversation if whoever that was wants to grab me for a coffee and we can kind of just keep chatting about the benefits of each. But we're actually, I'm pretty happy with the choice that we've made. So I know a number of other websites that we were looking at. So WorkSafe, County Court, and a few others are all on Vue.js. So trying to maintain a fairly common stack across BitGov, I think, is one of those reasons. In terms of server-side rendering, we're using something called Nuxt. So for React developers, that's the equivalent of Next, and basically manages all of our server-side rendering. So every single page is rendered server-side, and it's only subsequent requests that they get managed from the client side. And so yeah, that's basically how we get around those SEO issues. Did you find there was internally / organisationally focused content not intended for public view? If so, how did you deal with this content? We have a small amount of content that is kind of internally VPS focused, but there's not a lot of it. We're looking at a module called permissions by term, and then actually handling authentication just using JWT tokens. I've got 5 minutes. But most of the content we're really trying to encourage everyone to make it public facing unless there is a really strong reason not to, because we do have intranets, and so if you want something that's purely for the VPS, it's probably a better place to put it. But yeah, we are going to have like a protected content section as well. Next question we have is, how do you control governance and content creation across your domains? Was this a part of the project? I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, to be honest, but I'll give you what I think is happening because I'm not actually on the content team. But most of the content governance is centrally controlled. So we have like an internal content team. We have a lot of subject matter experts in different areas, and they create the initial content, which comes in to our people for approval. And editing and refinement before it actually gets published. But as a part of that, there are actually writing for the web workshops. We've got a number of tools that we're giving people to actually explain how to write content at particular grade age levels. So I think we're going for grade 8. Yeah, we're going for a grade 8 reading level, which means anyone with an 8th grade education should be able to read the content. So yeah, that's definitely a big part of the project, is actually that focus on content and not just on providing the website technology. Another one here, this is a huge effort, well done and thanks. Oh, you're welcome. What's the breakdown of your team's skills? Do you see that changing as the project matures? Yeah, so we've got a couple of front-end people, a couple of back-end guys, a DevOps person, myself, a new tech lead soon. But yeah, we do see that actually changing over time as demand actually grows. Outside of that kind of core team, so that's like the tech team, we've got 2 people in UX, and there's also a content team. The UX people actually sit under a service design area as well, that's within DPC. So the overall team is actually a reasonable size, but as we grow, we'll probably need to extend that out as well. But because we're tackling a lot more than just the technology, we will have that ongoing need for more UX people, more content people, those kind of things. What are the major challenges delivering headless with respect to development, admin, etc.? I reckon probably one of the biggest headaches we've had is maintaining a good back end for the front end. So there are always occasions where, let's say we're building the events content type, so we actually need to have that content type existing on the back end before you can deliver any front end. And we haven't always done it that way because we have a pattern library, you can actually build out quite a lot of componentry on the front end without a back end existing. But while you're going through that pull request process on the back end, it can be a little bit tricky to figure out, okay, well, exactly which environment am I pointing my front end to at this moment? And then someone jumps in and merges a PR and all of a sudden, you know, that environment disappears. And yeah, so I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges is just managing all your different environments and what's available in each of them. I think I can do one more. Yep, all right. You mentioned security. What sort of tools/processes are you using? Static container scanning. Yeah, so we've got something called key.io, which scans the containers that we create for vulnerabilities. But we've also got the team at Amazy who are kind of maintaining those containers as well and making sure that they're kind of putting any updates that they need to in there. So outside of that, I mean, we're using OpenShift, so I don't know if this person's aware of OpenShift, but there is a really big focus on security in OpenShift. So things like the containers can't actually run as root, so the containers are completely immutable even if you are able to get inside them. What other tools and processes are we using? More things should be coming to mind, but they're not. Maybe ask me after I have a coffee. Haven't actually managed to do that yet today. I think, is that me out of time? All right. So, thank you.